8th, 2009, talking about how much you must sacrifice to the church. Sacrifice must cost something. They don't just want your small donations. They want to maximize how much they're getting out of you. They want you to give until it hurts. Because they know that people, if they start rationalizing how much it is that they're giving and measuring that against how much suffering it causes them, they're not going to get as much. Because you're going to start waking up and realizing, oh, this is actually inconvenient. Oh, this is actually hurting my lifestyle. Oh, this is actually hurting me personally. The sacrifice must come personally. Offerings must cost something. Test the Lord's return on your giving. Malachi 3:10. They don't just they don't want you to track the return on investment, because it would mean that you're not getting a return, and you'd realize how little it is that you're getting back. With an unfalsifiable, well, it's not unfalsifiable, it's plenty falsifiable, because we got all the science we need to know that the things that people experience on their deathbed are nothing more than a flood of chemicals in the brain. It's not an afterlife. There is no afterlife. There is no reward that's coming for you because you gave a whole bunch of money to a cult organization. Memorize where a temple will be built. Adam took a sacrifice. Was placed to sacrifice. Sin brings death. Of course, the people who are bringing the death are Christians most of the time. They can't really track the mechanism, again, for how exactly sin brings death. When David built his temple, it took sacrifice. Abraham took his son to be sacrificed. I mean, that's religion that's causing the suffering there. Blood absorbs sin. I mean, have these people ever taken a medical course at all? Ben Search, 2/8/2009. Unprotected means not governed by their father. So here we've got rulership equals protection. So Putin, he's just protecting people. God makes Adam a helper. He can't make it on his own. You know, I've been living single since I was born. I've been living on my own since I was 30. I haven't needed a helper, and I don't need one in the foreseeable future. It's this whole network of dependence thing that the church is trying to push every step of the way. Because if you start to realize, hey, I don't need to be dependent on the church and I don't need to be dependent on other people, suddenly they make a lot less money. I mean, the real dependent thing here is a bunch of leeches and moochers over at the church. November 23rd, 2008. God grants, provides, gives. He is the authority, the owner of everything. The church wants God to be the owner of things because then they get to have a claim on your property, on you. They want you to be owned by the church. The church is the extension of God's will. You don't have to pray directly to the church and then the church is the intercessor for God, but the church is the hand of God's will on earth. And by extension, they're the authority of you. They want to own you. They want you to be their slave. They want you to be commanded by them. I mean, can you imagine a few years down the road after we've got theocrats in charge for some more years, we're going to start to see more of this, where the church has a claim to your property and you're forced to give to them, or you're forced to do what they say. And we've already seen this plenty in the courts. Obey, submit to God's will. Once again, blind obedience. They're not going to say why. No loving father will give his children something bad. Well, we were given the church. Women are to be busy at home. Women's emotions are variable. This is just going to deflect off of any Christian that's watching this video. It's just not even going to sink in that maybe women's role is not to be exclusively at home. Maybe actually they can be useful elsewhere. Because, I mean, most of the Christians watching this, that's all they've ever known. Or if they haven't, if they've known something else, it was just, that was the bad thing, and that was the time of suffering, and now that they're at home, this is the time where they've got, where life has been easier. They can't possibly conceive that maybe somebody else actually enjoys being out of the home and actually having a career. It's this whole thing, I mean, it plays into the individuality thing, where the individual is hated in Christianity. I mean, that is the worst thing for a woman to do, is to get out of that uniform role that the collective has assigned to them. It's not just that, in the practical sense, women are best applied when at the home. It's them acting as an individual, which is the bad thing. God didn't create a second man. I don't know what sermon this is from, but it was by probably Ben Search, maybe. This is in 2009, 2008, probably. Probably more like 2009. Multi-generational faithfulness is a big calling. You must raise your children who know the Lord. You're not giving children a choice when you're raising them up to adhere to a single theocratic system of life. You're not giving them the chance to explore that, hey, maybe there's more than one worldview out there. Because if you did, whenever you compare Christianity to life as a whole, or Christianity versus science, because they are at odds, there's no... Christianity doesn't have a chance. It doesn't have a shot. The only way that you can get people into Christianity is to raise them young. People don't go from atheism to Christianity. Anybody who's a Christian has some background in religion prior to coming into it. There's people who will come back to Christianity, but people don't just go cold turkey into Christianity. You've got agnostics, they're vulnerable targets, but atheists, no, you don't have a chance. Your descendants will be bigger changers of the world than you will. Once again, derogation of the individual. You don't have a chance at changing the world. Just leave it to somebody else. Brian Davis. This is from Post AM, February 22nd, 2009. I don't think that they could get away with this sermon today. Our culture has a lessening of gender differences. Men and women have different roles, complementary roles. And then they've got list A and list B. Of traits that are supposedly exclusive to one of the only two genders. I imagine it would backfire today, because if they did a survey of the room where people just started selecting the traits one at a time and they would start to see a mix, they would be like, oh, this actually isn't as proving of our point as we wanted it to be. The Trinity has diversity with an hierarchy of power, yet equality. Try to wrap your brain around that one. For the bajillionth time, there is no Trinity in either the Old or New Testament. I've been over this in other videos. Watch them. False humility is sin. Be humble, or else. Get your nose back in the dirt. Get on your hands and feet where you belong, because you are just an animal who should be deserving of nothing more than to praise the higher being. The one that's speaking through the church and through his people. Those are the people that you should be kneeling before. Here's a good quote. The more independent you are from God, the more futile your efforts are. I mean, do we need a more explicit statement that the church is against the individual, that the Bible is against the individual than that? Men have the strength that women need. Once I left the church, I started meeting more people and more sane people, and that's when I started realizing that there are a lot of strong women out there, and strong men too, because it does take some strength, more strength to be an individual than it does to be a follower, a brainwashed minion of the church. Atheist people are stronger than Christian people. They are less dependent on physical force and threats and threats of force. They're just better people. And Christians are going to hate hearing that, because they're like, no, we're all just on a level plane and we need to coexist. No. You're depending on supernatural force and threats of hell to get what you want. April 26, 2009. Our culture has lowered the standards and ages of relationships. You want to talk about low ages for relationships? Look at the Old Testament. I mean, we're talking like 13 minus. It's just, and back then when these sermons were being given, at least, before all the sex scandals started coming out, Christians were like, well, they had, that was the norm back then. It was okay. It's like, it took secular people to raise the age of consent and of marriage. It didn't take the church to do that. Have teens date in groups. Because we don't want you to date as an individual. We want you to be part of the collective. So when they talk about purity, just imagine that in a different context. Replace purity in the sexual sense with purity of race, and see if it still makes sense. It's just as bad. Be pure. Verses 3 through 5. The impure have no inheritance in the kingdom of God. So if you don't go along with the biblical plan for marriage, then you're impure, and you're going to die, and you're going to go to hell. It's a fear-based thing. And they don't want you as an individual to be making your own choices. That is why dating is so bad in the church. You'll know early on if a person isn't a good pick. And then in the same sermon, they're like, don't live together. So which is it? Go ahead and start an intense relationship with a person, or break it off with them soon. Either way, living together is impugned as a bad thing, and dating with the purpose of marriage in mind is supposed to be a good thing, even though they're contradicting themselves in the same sermon. I don't know if I'm being clear with that or not. Don't marry an unbeliever. Well, that's fine, because believe it or not, we don't like you guys. 2 Corinthians 6:14, don't go into any relationships with unbelievers. Okay, so I was going to say something. They don't want to chance it that you're going to leave the church once you start realizing there's something other than the church out there. If you start dating an unbeliever, there's a chance that you're going to leave the church. That would be a bad thing for them. It's bad for business, the church business. The son must ask the father of the daughter to date her. Creepy. Once again, derogation of the individual. I keep saying derogation. I don't know if that's the right term. But the point is, the individual doesn't have the choice in their own matters. It's always somebody else. In this, it's the structure of the church that has to be deferred to for that. Ephesians 5:17 through 18. Don't drink, as if you needed another reason not to adhere to the beliefs of the Bible. March 1st, 2009. Only in God can you find true happiness. So if you're happy, which, by the way, in other sermons we've seen that they're like, happiness is a bad thing, joy is a good thing. Joy doesn't mean happiness. Joy just means following the dictates of the church. So here they're saying only in God can you find true happiness, but happiness here doesn't actually mean happiness. It means misery. It means sacrifice. It means suffering. So really, they should have rephrased it as, only in God can you find suffering. Although if they did that, they would have to revise it to God causes suffering. And that's really what they're getting at here. But they don't want to say it like that. They've got to invert the values. Then they talk about Solomon and all of the earthly things that Solomon had and how bad of a thing that was. Really, they just want you to get into the habit of not doing anything unless it directly benefits the church. This you've got to see. Do you see that? It says, death is life. You shouldn't need any more of an indicator that the church is committed to deathism than just that one title. This is from April 12th, 2009. It's just a complete inversion of humanitarianism, of thinking that actually life might be something worth enjoying, that life is good on its own without the promise of an afterlife, that actually life is a virtue worth seeking. They want you to die. They want you to suffer. They want you to die because, I mean, in part it means that they get your inheritance if they've played their cards right. Matthew 16, verse 25, whoever loses his life will find it. They want you to die, okay? They don't want you to live a life. They don't want you to live, period. It's like, oh no, Christianity isn't pro-suicide. It's not pro-death. This life's material pursuits are futile. Which means, of course, you should give us your futile stuff. I mean, you're not using it, so why not give it to us? We'll spend it wisely. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 14, without resurrection, faith is pointless. Well, with or without resurrection, faith is pointless. Then they go on and on and on about the resurrection, about prophecies fulfilled. The Bible said it, therefore it's true. What's this? Oh no, it's time for another lesson from this God that I just invented. Hello, God. Hello. So what are you going to tell us about this time? This time I'm going to tell you about the time that I died twice and got resurrected twice. Wow, that's like double the number of times in the Bible. We should definitely believe this because it's a bigger claim. So how many people saw you? 13,000 million. That is a lot of people. That's like 13 billion. I didn't even know that was possible. But my book said it was true, so that means it's true. Self-justifying scripture from the latest God that came out. We should definitely believe it because the claims are big. It fulfilled, did it fulfill your prophecies? Yes, it fulfilled all the prophecies because I said so. It's internally consistent, right? Well, if you've ever watched anything by Aaron Ra, you'll know that those prophecies weren't fully fulfilled and weren't accurately fulfilled. We still get the church in spite of those inconsistencies claiming that they did get fulfilled. Of course, if all you've ever known is the church, then it's like, yeah, they were 100% fulfilled and accurately fulfilled. And they totally weren't just written in after the fact, just saying, yeah, I'm going to claim X, Y, and Z was fulfilled because it suits my purposes. And it's like they've got these straw man theory, like the swoon theory, the stolen body theory. What they don't cover is the we made it all up after the fact theory. When you become a Christian, you die to yourself. In other words, the self dies, and you become one of us. One of us. Obey, obey, obey. Give us all your money. The resurrection, John 5:24. Christians have already crossed over to life. Gives Jesus the right to make any claims he wants. So, write something fictional, make a big claim, and then just say it's true. The big refuge that Christianity has is obscurity. The further back you go in the gaps in our knowledge, the easier it is to make a claim. It's like all you have to do is turn to the Greek myths, and you'll see resurrection stuff popping up everywhere. And all kinds of claims to divinity, and there's no more reason that you should believe those than you should Christianity. Ephesians 5, verse 22 through 24, wives submit to husbands' spiritual authority. And it's no reason why so many women are trapped in abusive marriages in the Christian church. It's because of verses like this. They can't get out. It's like, okay, you're in psychological and practical, you're stuck in a Stockholm-y kind of a situation with no way out. And the church isn't going to be of any help there. The word for submit means a willful relinquishing of decision making. Is based on devotion to God, not man. Of course, God is speaking through his people, which means the church or other Christians, which is really a terrible situation to be in if you are underneath the church, because you have to relinquish your decision making to the church or to your parents, and then they've got this terrifying specter of eternal punishment to back it up. It's like, I mean, what a terrible way to live, just under that just fear-based society. Sacrifice for one another, give us your stuff. Ephesians 5:25 through 27. Ephesians 5 verse 31, the two will become one, which is really scary if you think about abusive relationships. Well, they're my other half. I'm not a whole person without this abusive person. Once again, we've got this myth of God came as a poor, lowly man with humility. Look up the myth of Zeus as a traveler and a visitor, and you'll see the same thing. Of course, when you look at John, that humility just goes poof. Ephesians 6, verse 1, obey your parents. Then the tagline for that really should be, or else, because we all know that's what's coming next. The comments are directed towards, the comments are directed to the children. No, I mean, aside from that one verse, which, I mean, has to do with slavery, slavery in the sense that you are obeying God vis-a-vis the parents. Children are obeying God when they obey parents. Once again, elevation of humans to godhood status. So if your parents have a bad idea, it's God's idea, and you've got to follow it no matter what. It's just so creepy, and it just, I mean, this is where you get the gateway to abusive parents. And you're supposed to obey these people as if they're demigods. Obey means listen carefully, grammatically. Yeah, in other contexts, it doesn't mean listen carefully. It actually means do what we're telling you to do. Listen carefully to what it is that we're telling you to do, or else. Verses 2 through 3, obey parents and respect and honor them. What they don't cover there is what happens when your parents are undeserving of honor and are dishonorable people and are fools. You're supposed to obey them anyway, because there is the promise of a divine afterlife where all the terrible decisions that you've made are rewarded with something else. Obedience of parents trains children to obey God. So, obedience to fools trains you to obey a foolish God. Or an evil God, or malevolent God. Continuing. Then they've got a long, this is Kyle Idleman, by the way. They've got a long list of what you are and aren't supposed to do with a child, not backed up by scripture, just has no more scriptural backing than somebody who's doing motivational speaking. Psalm 127, verses 3 through 5, full quiver of children. People try to, once again, the equation of having a lot of children with warfare, as if like having a bunch of children is going to help you defeat your mortal enemy, the Muslims. You're going to just outbreed the Muslims when you've got, you know, Islamic families having huge numbers of children on like Jehovah's Witnesses or Catholic or Mormon levels. And it's like, yeah, that'll work. All it's really going to do is make you poorer and have your children raised with less education and less means to support themselves. The greatest joy is to hear children are walking in the truth, 1 John. So it's not the children themselves, it's the children are adhering to the agenda of the church and the Bible and the cult. The mark of a great mom is that she's closer to God than she is to you. Wow, thanks. You're more beholden to your religious agenda than you are to your own children. Just more dehumanization. June 27th, 2009, Dave Stone. Service and sacrifice is a sign of humility. Once again, give us your stuff, or else. Submission, to place yourself under the authority of another. It is a sign of humility. So be humble, which means place yourself under the authority of another, which means that the church is the authority. They want to have authority over you.